A lot of people call Dune one of the greatest science fiction novels ever written, and honestly, I think that phrase almost undersells it. Because reading Dune doesn't feel like reading a normal science fiction novel. It feels like discovering a sealed sacred text from a civilization vanished a long time ago. It's almost theology, a book that somehow feels ancient and futuristic at the same time. And the weirdest part is, 60 years later, after thousands of science fiction stories have borrowed from it, copied it, or tried to improve on it, nothing feels quite like Dune. So the question today is, why is this book so powerful? There are certain books that feel important because people tell you they're important. We've all seen those, right? And then there are books that announce their importance the moment you open the first page. Dune is one of those books. The first time I read it, I had a very, very guttural reaction that I think most readers have. Confusion. And this strange lingering vertigo where your brain is trying to process exactly what it stepped into. Because Herbert doesn't ease you into that world. He doesn't stand at the door with a polite introduction and an appendices. Hello, readers, let me explain how the universe works. No, he drops you out the plane in the middle of a desert with no clothes on, and it's up to you to survive the giant sandworms. Let's be real. And somehow that's exactly why it works. That's what makes Dune feel completely different from almost every other science fiction novel. It doesn't feel like it was written for you, it feels discovered. Like those events happened thousands of years ago and you stumbled across the cave by the Dead Sea with the surviving record. And I think that's the first part of Herbert's genius. He understands that real history never arrives with explanations. Nobody pauses halfway through the Crusades to define every political structure or religious movement for your convenience. Civilizations are messy, belief systems evolve, language mutates, power fractures and reforms, and Herbert builds all of that into the DNA of this book. This is one of the reasons Dune still feels so good. The world building isn't decoration, it's archaeology. You don't read it, you excavate it with a little brush and a trowel. And we're so far into humanity's future at this point, the Earth itself has become little more than a myth. Think about that. Most science fictions, novels, stories, TV imagines humans carrying traces of our presence into the stars. Maybe shinier technology, maybe cooler ships. Maybe everyone's wearing silver jumpsuits because apparently that was the future according to every sci-fi cover artist in the 1970s. Or Seven of Nine. But Herbert imagined something far stranger, a future so distant from our presence that it's basically, our present is basically ancient prehistory. This isn't humanity with upgrades. This is humanity transformed by tens of thousands of years of political evolution, religious manipulation, genetic planning, ecological collapse, and philosophical shifts. And somehow, despite all of that scale, Dune feels intimate. That's the trick. For all its sprawling politics and galactic power struggles, this is fundamentally a human story. A story about fear, destiny, power, faith, control, and what happens when people start believing in something bigger than themselves. And this is where the influences in Herbert's writing come through. Because Dune isn't just science fiction, it's a collision of history, theology, ecology, and myth. You can feel the fingerprints of so many traditions across the pages. There's a clear inspiration from Catholicism, Christianity, Buddhism, Islam, Judaism, you name it. It's all in there. And you can hear it, especially the Islamic influence in certain words, jihad, for example. These aren't just random exotic flourishes. They're center of the architecture of the story. He was deeply interested in how religions shape civilizations, how belief can be cultivated, weaponized, and inherited and used for both good and evil. That's one of the reasons I think this book just feels so intellectually alive. It asks you uncomfortable questions. What if the prophet is manufactured? What if the messiahs are political tools? What if people waiting for salvation get exactly what they asked for and it destroys everything? That's bold territory, especially for a novel published in the mid-60s. Then there's the ecological side of it. And this might be the one thing that really sticks out in my head. Frank Herbert was talking seriously about environmental systems, resource scarcity, planetary adaptation long before most mainstream science fiction treated those ideas as central themes. Arrakis isn't just a setting, it's an organism. A fully realized ecological machine where every creature, every survival strategy, every culture, every grain of sand feels interconnected. The desert matters, the worms matter, the spice matters. Nothing exists just because it sounds cool. Although, admittedly, giant sandworms are extremely cool and terrifying. Let's be real. I think sometimes literary analyzing can make things sound so serious, and we forget to acknowledge the obvious. Yes, the giant worm monsters are awesome. Sometimes greatness and giant nightmare noodles can coexist. Let's be honest. But what makes them unforgettable isn't spectacle, it's symbolism. The sandworms are ecology, divinity, terror, power, all wrapped into this one giant nightmare noodle. They are nature at its most indifferent and most scared. And reading those sequences, there's a feeling hard to describe about them. It's odd, but it's with teeth. That's really the emotional texture of Dune, I think. Awe with danger, wonder laced with dread. Even when nothing overtly terrifying is happening, there's this constant underlying tension. A sense that everything is trapped inside forces far larger than themselves. Inheritance, politics, prophecy, history, biology, all of that stuff. No matter how powerful a character seems, they're all being pushed by a system they can't fully control. That's what gives Dune its weight. It's not just telling you a story, it's making you feel the pressure of inevitability. And then there's Paul Atreides. Probably one of the most misunderstood protagonists in any science fiction novel I've read or read about as well. Because if you only engage with Dune at a surface level, it's easy to read him as the classic chosen one. Young noble heir, special abilities, prophesized destiny, raised amongst an oppressed people. Sound familiar? I mean, in fairness, it could be Moses. Let's be real. And that's because modern storytelling has spent decades borrowing this framework. But Herbert wasn't celebrating the trope, he was ripping it apart, dissecting it, questioning it, warning us about it. Paul isn't just a hero, he's not the straightforward, I'm the chosen one. He is the beginning of a really horrible nightmare. The cautionary tale. A study of what happens when charisma, power, and belief collide. And rereading the book with that understanding changes everything. You stop reading it as a triumph and you start reading it as tension, as inevitability, as a tragedy waiting patiently for its cue. And I think that's another reason this novel just sticks in your brain. It evolves on where you are when you've read it, on who you are. I read it when I was a teenager for the first time and it was epic. It was big. It was cool. But later, now, reading it in my late 30s, it feels like reading a slow motion catastrophe. Few books manage that. Let's be real. Then there's the writing itself. Herbert writes in a way that feels almost intentionally alien. It's dense, sometimes abrupt, occasionally frustrated. There are moments where you will absolutely have to reread a paragraph and ask yourself whether your brain briefly stopped cooperating or just flipped a switch. And not the difficulty is part of the experience. This is not a comfort read. This is not immersion through comfort. This is immersion through disorientation. Herbert makes you work for understanding because understanding is one of the central obsessions of the book. To read Dune is to constantly interpret, to question, to decode. You're never fully passive, and that's why it left a mark with me. It demands participation. You don't consume Dune, you survive it. And when you come out the other side, you might be changed by it. Slightly dizzy, maybe wiser, maybe end up on a 4-hour internet deep dive about it. Possibly considering whether your living room could support a giant sandworm ornament sculpture thingy. Which, for legal and practical reasons, I probably shouldn't recommend, but I want one. What I love most about Dune is the feeling it leaves behind. That strange, lingering sensation after you close the book, like you've just returned from something vast and ancient and just chaos. Like your brain spent several hundred pages breathing different air. Very few novels create atmosphere at that level. And that's why Dune still matters. Not because it's influential, though it absolutely is, and not because it inspired countless stories, because it obviously did. It still matters because it feels alive. Still strange, still challenging, still capable of making readers feel small in the best possible way. It reminds us and me what science fiction can do when its aims are beyond entertainment, when it becomes philosophical, theological, environmentally warning, political meditations, myth making, all at once, and that's rare because a lot of modern writers are scared of themes like this. Or if they do them, they're very surface level. I think reading it just feels surreal now, because in an era where so much fiction explains itself endlessly, where every world building detail gets flattened into just page dumping, Dune trusts the readers. It still expects effort. It still respects intelligence. And it still asks you to meet it halfway. And maybe that's why people keep coming back to it, because some books entertain you, some books impress you, and there are some books alter after in your brain as you read them. Dune still does that. It gets into your head like spice. And once it's there, it changes how you see science fiction forever, because you can see its influence through everything. If you've read Dune, I'd love to know what your experiences are. Was it an immediate obsession, total confusion, mix of both? Because I genuinely think this is one of those books every reader experiences differently. And if you haven't read it, just know the first 50 pages will make you feel like you've accidentally joined a conversation halfway through. That's normal, keep going. The desert reveals itself slowly. I'm Darth James. That was this episode. Remember, you can support this channel by leaving a comment, liking, subscribing, hitting that bell icon, or hyping this video. And if you want to go deeper into the conversations that we have here, check out my channel memberships, Patreon, and Substack. I'll leave this one here. And just don't bring a sandworm next time.